Greetings and courtesy and respect to you, dear and lovely people of this beautiful planet. This is the Elixir of Awareness channel. Welcome to the episode 20. The title of this episode of ours is Common Sense. We want to talk about the fact that if there's a know-it-all person in a group, how interestingly, that know-it-all person becomes the common sense of society. In this episode, we want to talk about the importance of collective wisdom and reject the idea of human naivety. And we use the ideas of the 4 main books to prepare this episode for you. To better understand the main topic of this episode, it's better to start with individual concept first. That is to say, first we talk about individual wisdom, and then we enter the discussion of collective wisdom. Throughout history, belief in the gullibility and naivety of humans has played a fundamental role in shaping our view of society. In the first part of this episode, we first go to the ideas of a book entitled Not Born Yesterday by Hugo Mercier, in which, based on various research and pieces of evidence, he explains that we as humans aren't only naive, rather we very complex cognitive mechanisms which help us to evaluate and analyze issues better and deeper. It should be noted that our discussion isn't that we never fall into cognitive errors, or that we never make mistakes. Rather, our discussion in this episode is that we humans are extremely alert despite all human weaknesses. To prove this idea, we must first go to the theory of evolution, where all human abilities are slowly cooking and forming in the big cauldron of history. In all nature, organisms are busy sending different communication signals to each other. From the simplest form to the most complex form of communication that belongs to our human species. And an important challenge in this world of communication is the validation of signals. It means that living beings can validate and evaluate the message they receive and pass those signals through their different and unique cognitive filters. Let's give an example. For example, there's a species of deer in Africa that start moving and jumping fast when it sees an aggressive predator like a lion or a leopard. But these jump isn't because of fear and to escape. Rather, it's a way to show off its agility and ability. In fact, by doing this, it shows the hunter that I'm agile and conveys this message to it: don't tire yourself or me. And let's never start this chasing game because you'll lose. The deer transmits a message to the hunter in the form of a communication signal. On the other hand, the hunter also receives these signals with its cognitive mechanisms and, as a result, will decide whether this attack and this chase is worth the loss of energy or not. Actually, the hunter is evaluating whether it's supposed to attack or not. But this was just an example. In fact, all creatures have their own unique cognitive mechanisms to evaluate and diagnose between true and false messages. And this ability has reached its peak in us humans, who can be said to have the most complex communication mechanisms. In the process of our evolution, we desperately needed to cooperate with each other. A creature that is as social as a human being and the center of its own and its society's development based. It must have cognitive mechanisms and mental powers that can distinguish some wrong messages from the right ones in these communications. It means not to be naive. In fact, we want to say that because during human evolution, the issue of cooperation has always been important and central. Both the sender of the message and the receiver of the message has mechanisms that can confirm those messages as much as possible. And we as human species that is so dependent on cooperation, if we were naive, we'd have become extinct by now. We can look at this issue from another angle. If a species is omnivorous, that is to say, its diet includes a wide range of foods, and its food sensitivity is much higher and more precise regarding the consumption of different foods. So when we humans, due to the nature of our creation, are constantly exposed to different messages and communications, this sensitivity also exists in our mental system. In fact, because we're omnivores in terms of receiving information, our cognitive system is more accurate and sensitive in this regard. We humans have 2 very important mental tools in this field. One is intuition and the other is logic. Let's start with intuition. Intuition usually happens at the beginning of receiving a message, and its nature is also unconscious. We don't learn to work and communicate with our intuition in today's modern world, and this is a very valuable feature that we must pay attention to, but we usually don't have time to focus on it. Intuition helps us to consider very subtle and small signs in our judgment, signs that may not be seen with our conscious eyes. In fact, intuition unconsciously provides us with a general assessment of the situation we're in and of the message our mind receives. Freud was saying that no mortal can keep a secret. It means that even if our lips don't move, our body screams the truth. This means that even if a person tries to lie to us, but a small and subtle sign such as the shaking of the eyebrows or the movements of the facial muscles or eyes will reveal a feeling which is uncontrolled. And the audience also fully understands this issue using the tools of their intuition. The history of evolution has amazingly given this social creature the ability to intuitively understand the messages and intentions of other people. For example, the movements of the facial muscles, or the pupils of the eyes, or even the capillaries under the skin cause reddening of the face, or even trembling of the hands. All these reactions unconsciously happen and unconsciously convey messages. But the reactions of humans in the form of these signs that we've said against emotional signals is unconscious and is revealed only in about 1/5 of a second. And surprisingly, humans can receive and evaluate and validate those messages in a very short time. But as we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, all this doesn't mean that we humans don't have cognitive errors. And even if all our cognitive errors are put together, again, it doesn't mean that we humans are naive. Rather, it means that only human knowledge is limited. And this is a matter that we'll discuss further in this episode. But apart from our intuition and instinct, another of our cognitive tools is logic, which is activated in the long term. If a wrong signal mistakenly passes through our intuitive filter and isn't recognized, we've the opportunity to evaluate that signal in the medium and long term with our reasoning and logic. But there are some important points that we should pay attention to. The first point is that being deceived or making a mistake doesn't mean that a person is naive. History has proven that even the best and most professional demagogues can't deceive society for more than a few years. For example, if we examine the reports of the Nazis' intelligence services, the fact is clearly revealed that from 1940 onwards, according to the Nazis' own intelligence apparatus, German citizens were no longer interested in the old slogans and the Nazi Party. If the repetition of a slogan is the only effective factor in the growth of prejudice at a certain point, so where the density of these slogans is higher, then the prejudice should be more there. But research has confirmed the opposite. And here another question arises, and that question is, what was the reason for the stubbornness of the German soldiers in the war? We mentioned the answer to this question in the episode A Hopeful History. But here again, we point out that the main reason for the exemplary tenacity of the German soldiers in the war was empathy with small groups of comrades who developed a close bond between them due to bitter and difficult common experiences. That is to say, the studies show that the information of these soldiers about the ideology of the main ideals of Nazi Germany was very insignificant and pale. We want to say that the main reason for the success of the Nazis in bringing society together with them wasn't the strange propaganda machine of the Nazis. Rather, the main reason was the prejudices and wounds of the people in the First World War. And remember that this relative success in bringing society together has only lasted a little over a decade. For a deeper understanding of this topic, the best source of study is to read the text of reports that describe the daily life of people during those authoritarian structures. In fact, the official media reports of these structures can't bring us closer to reality. In general, what can be understood by examining the situation of people in these societies and these structures is that the power of advertising in the world of trade and business has been exaggerated. The fact is that most people who work in the field of advertising know that it's really difficult to persuade people. And we just want to say that we shouldn't believe the credulity of humans so quickly. As human beings, we've only one perspective on situations, and throughout history, almost before the Age of Enlightenment, the function of accusing people of quick belief was only to justify cruel conditions and violate human rights. At the same time, it's important to say that if people learn critical and logical thinking, they can act better and smarter. And also they can build their society better. But this shouldn't make us ignore a big problem. The biggest problem for us humans isn't naivety, but our limitations. And the important question that we want to address in the rest of this part is there a solution for this problem or not? And is there a way for humans to distance themselves from their cognitive problems? At the end of the first part of this episode, we asked how we as humans can go beyond our cognitive limitations. The answer to this important question is in one word: group. In fact, group thinking helps people rise above their limited vision. Researches show that groups act remarkably intelligently in the right conditions. Of course, this idea also has serious critics. For example, the most serious critic of this idea in the history of thought is Mr. Gustave Le Bon. Le Bon was worried about the growth of democracy in the West in the 19th century. He was actually worried that the common people would be able to gain decision-making power. In 1895, he wrote a book called The Crowd: A Study of the Popular Mind. And this book has two basic ideas. One is that the group is more than a simple collection of members. That is, a group has an identity independent of its members. And the second idea of this book was that this collective identity can be brave and cowardly. But according to Mr. Gustave Le Bon, it can never be smart. Now, after about 120 years since this book was written, we know with a lot of evidence that the first idea of this book is correct. That is to say, the group has an identity distinct from the identity of its members. And of course, it's strangely at the same time dependent on its members, and at the same time independent of its members. So it can be said that this idea is correct. But as for the book's second idea, that the crowd isn't smart, we now know that idea is completely wrong. Contrary to Le Bon's opinion, if the group is large enough and consists of enough people with different and diverse and independent attitudes, and if the group has a certain type of decentralization, it can make decisions that are significantly wiser and smarter than individual decisions. There's an ancient proverb saying in the Persian culture, "Everyone knows everything." And research shows that this sentence is completely true. Even if none of the people in the group know the exact answers to the questions and challenges, but strangely and surprisingly, the average of that group, which means the collective wisdom, knows many of the answers with a very good approximation. For example, for many years a contest was broadcast on TV in which the participants had to answer 15 questions in a row to win. If the participant got stuck in answering a question, they could use 3 ways to help. One is to remove 2 options out of 4 options. Another way is to contact a smart person or an informed friend. And the third help was to ask the opinion of the audience present in the program studio. This contest was aired for many years, and after evaluating all these episodes during these years, they realized that the audience's opinion was correct 91% of the time. Other types of research also repeatedly confirm this result. For example, simple research like guessing the temperature of a room. When different groups of people in the same room were asked to guess the temperature of the room, researchers realized that their guesses mightn't be very close to reality individually. But when they collected the total opinions and averaged them, it was very close to the actual temperature of the room. The same research, for instance, regarding the number of chocolates in a jar, or guessing the weight of a cow, or how to get out of a maze, always had the same result. In fact, the average guess of a group's opinions is usually closer to the truth than the guess of the members one by one. It's as if we're facing a strange phenomenon that science has recently made self-aware. And that phenomenon is the collective unconscious. It's as if different people of the same group or society shine at different points like the neurons of the same brain. And they can reach a result that is usually close to reality in a strange partnership in the face of questions and challenges. And the important point here is that maybe no one's opinion alone is completely correct, but the collective opinion, that is to say, the sum of everyone's opinion, is usually closer to reality. One of the important reasons for power in collective wisdom is multiplicity. A group has a different view of a problem or issue depending on the number of its members. Collecting these views can give us the most accurate possible picture of any subject. Difference and diversity, which is an important point in the group, help us to have different perspectives on a specific issue. A good group and a good society don't only suppress difference, but to be more effective, it even promotes the difference and independence of people. The identical groups quickly become ineffective because they only have one answer for each question. The important issue is that no individual's intelligence alone is enough to solve complicated problems in today's complex world. No person can have different perspectives to solve a problem at the same time. An interesting thing you should know is that smart people fall into a trap called the genius trap. That is, they don't see the blind spots of their prejudices. Because they're masters of reasoning and are smart, they can come up with various justifications and arguments for their mistakes. As a result, they never even realize their mistakes. Simon and his colleagues showed in research that if you show a chessboard with the pieces that have been played according to the rules to a great chess master, they can correctly guess the course of the game and the previous moves, which is very interesting. But if we show a chessboard to a chess master, that pieces have only been randomly placed and no game played, you'll see that chess grandmaster won't be any different from an amateur person. We want to say that if our world has only one formula, that formula is disorder and uncertainty. Billions of accidents make even every small happen. And, as we mentioned in the previous example, even the smartest minds are always faced with a chessboard where certain rules and regulations haven't been followed. That's why they're unable to understand it, and that's why collective wisdom can reach a more correct understanding of it. A very important point here is that intelligence is different from rationality. The intelligence of a person can be higher than the average intelligence of others. But the rationality of the individual can't be higher than the collective wisdom. Because the difference between rationality and intelligence is that rationality can show more angles of a subject. The nature of history and today's science has repeatedly shown that the power of understanding the realities of our world is beyond the understanding of even the most powerful human minds. That's why we need a group, actually a network of minds, so that we can understand and analyze different things more correctly. But being in a group has errors or damages also that we must point out to be able to act smarter. In the first years of the 20th century, a naturalist named William Beebe and his companions saw a very strange scene in Ghana's forests. They saw a huge group of ants moving in a big circle one after the other. It took approximately 2.5 hours for each ant to go around the circle completely and return to its original place. And the ants weren't getting out of this circle. They were moving in that circle for a full day until most of them died. In the world of naturalists, this phenomenon that sometimes occurs is called the ant mill or death spiral. This observed phenomenon is the result of a problem in the ants' colony. When soldier ants lose the pheromone track in their way and can't find the nest, then they follow one simple rule, and that rule is to only follow the ant in front of you. As a result, they usually get stuck in a disastrous cycle. But why did we tell this story? Because an important issue that is effective in the intelligence of the group is that the members, unlike soldier ants, can have independence and individuality. It means that they can think and reason by themselves. Independence doesn't mean isolation, rather it's relative freedom from the absolute influence of the others. We want to say that we aren't condemned like ants to only follow the person in front of us. And the independence of each person, and being able to analyze and evaluate alone helps the whole group to act smarter. Because it helps to add a new and independent perspective to the whole issue. It's very important to know that the independence of the members of a group or a society helps that new information and actions enter the society. And this is what causes destructive collective and group cycles to break. If the members in a group can criticize or even violate the main ideas of the group, the power of reason of that group increases greatly. Another important issue for making groups smarter is the important issue of decentralization. In the new social sciences with new findings, there's a theory called spontaneous order. The idea of a spontaneous order means an order which emerges as the result of the voluntary activities of individuals, and not one which is created by a government, is a key idea in the classical liberal and free market tradition. Spontaneous order is the result of billions of human actions that seem to be the result of a perfectly capable mind. But in fact, no human has built it individually. This spontaneous order is somehow created by the collective unconscious of a group or a society. And this order exists not only in the mind of one person, but in the minds of millions of people. And an important question here is how to predict this spontaneous order. And how can this collective unconscious become conscious? Here, one of the most important things that we neglected is the discussion of art. Art in its original form originates from the unconscious of the artist. For this reason, it's somehow deeply related to the collective unconscious. It's as if the artist, without realizing it, is narrating the things that rule the times and exist in society. In fact, some things are still unconscious, and there's a short distance to become conscious of them. Actually, in art, we can find the footprint of what'll happen in the future. Another important question to ask is whether there is anything we can do to improve this spontaneous order. And the important thing is that we shouldn't place this spontaneous order in a traditional structure and concentrate it on one point. The important way to flourish rationality in society and groups is the important issue of decentralization that we shortly talked about. But let's talk a little more about it for a better understanding of the issue and go to the world of business and technology to present various examples of this decentralization concept. One thing we know today is that the less power is concentrated in structures and organizations, the more efficient they'll. We can see different examples of the output of these structures in our daily life and the world of technology. A very good example is blockchain technology, which has been able to create a huge revolution in the field of currency exchange and the concept of money by using this decentralization, and has completely transformed the old banking systems to a great extent. In fact, the strength of blockchain power in its transparency, and especially its decentralization. The people of each network confirm the transactions individually, and by recording the information in encrypted blocks, the possibility of manipulating the information is almost zero. Thus, the security of the network is ensured by the network members themselves. And, of course, all the transactions in most blockchain networks are visible to all members of the network. And it means transparency and decentralization. Regardless of what the future of digital currencies will be like, and with all possible advantages and disadvantages, it can be said that blockchain technology is considered a great revolution in the world. And the basis of this great revolution is the concept of decentralization. Another example is Wikipedia, the world's largest encyclopedia. But who wrote Wikipedia? The answer is all people. Actually, the collective wisdom has made the whole of it and participates in it. Or, for instance, YouTube is the world's largest university, where content creators from all over the world form the YouTube space. And this is how science and awareness spread. One of the best operating systems in the world is Linux, which is actually written by different people and edited by different people without having an official structure. And it's an open source operating system. Another good example is Google. If what you're looking for is provided by Google efficiently, it's because of using collective wisdom. That is to say, one of Google's algorithms is that it examines other people's searches in the past and then provides you with the pages that it recognizes by analyzing these details. In fact, Google relies on the collective wisdom of others to suggest pages to you. Another example is the world of science, where the most important researches are done collectively. And we see that sometimes the Nobel Prize is jointly awarded to several scientists. It shows how is important collective wisdom. This idea of decentralization is so important that even armies, which are the most hierarchical of structures, are being reshaped to become more efficient. That means that many important decisions to people who've local knowledge are assigned, and the same path is followed in the case of governments and companies all over the world. One of the good examples in the business world is the story of Ford. In 1970, Ford realized that it was lagging behind its eastern rivals, such as Toyota. And after analyzing, they reached a very important conclusion. They realized that the main difference is between their structures. For example, they checked that there were 15 different layers in Ford Company between the manager of the factory hall and the CEO. But for example, in Toyota Company, there were only 5 organizational positions between the worker and the CEO. And this flat structure in Toyota Company made the flow of information transfer and creativity exist in the structure of the company. And this is what was blocked in the Ford Company in that period. That is to say, they realized that the management in that structure has isolated itself from the realities of the production hall and work output with 15 layers. And the solution was actually to promote decentralization, which became the key to the success of Ford and many other companies in the world. Many companies moved away from the Taylorism model and moved closer and closer to a model based on decentralization. If we want to summarize what we've talked about so far, we must say that a group must have 4 main characteristics to work wisely and more intelligently. One is to recognize the differences in the group. Another is the independence of group members. The third is decentralization, and the fourth factor is also mechanisms to transform individual judgments into a collective decision. These 4 characteristics are the most important assets of a human community to shape collective wisdom. Collective wisdom is the most important tool for a community to face its challenges. And talking and knowing about it helps us to go beyond our individual limitations and to be able to think and act more intelligently as a community. The final question of this episode is, do you agree with the idea of collective wisdom and its effects? Please share your comments with us. Thank you very much for accompanying us until the end of this episode. Be happy and victorious.